The elevator doors opened on the 47th floor of Sky Han Tower, and every single person in that executive lounge went quiet. Not because of a sound. Not because of an announcement. Not because someone famous had walked in. They went quiet because of a girl. She could not have been more than 17 years old. She wore a plain white dress, no designer label, no jewelry except for one thing, a delicate necklace that caught the light in a way that seemed almost impossible, warm and golden and old, the kind of old that belongs to something that has survived things it was never supposed to survive. Her skin was deep and rich like polished umber, her locks pulled back loosely, and she walked into that room of floor-to-ceiling glass and billion-dollar views and white-gloved servers the way a person walks into a place they have always known. Not arrogant. Not nervous. Just still. Completely, unnervingly still. The men in that room had built satellites. They had moved markets. One of them had restructured the South Korean telecommunications industry before he turned 40. They did not startle easily. But something about this girl made every one of them pause. She sat down in the far corner, near the glass that looked out over the Han River, placed her small bag on the seat beside her, folded her hands on the table, and looked out at Seoul like she was trying to remember something she had forgotten a long time ago. That was when Han Jiwoon walked in. He was 34 years old, the CEO of Sky Han Technologies, and the most feared man in that building. Not because he was loud, he was never loud. Not because he threatened, he rarely needed to. He was feared because he was precise. Because when Han Jiwoon looked at something, really looked at it, it felt like being taken apart and catalogued. Like he could see every thread of you and knew exactly which one to pull. He walked in with 3 executives behind him, mid-conversation, already scrolling through something on his phone. He did not look up immediately. He never did. He always finished his thought first. And then he looked up. And he stopped walking. Not dramatically. Not in a way that anyone else could have pointed to as evidence of something. But the man behind him nearly walked into his back, and that man had followed Jiwoon for 6 years and had never once miscalculated his pace. Jiwoon's eyes had found the girl in the corner. She was not looking at him. She was still looking at the river. He stood there for exactly 4 seconds, for seconds that felt, to the executive behind him, like 4 minutes, and then he moved again, sat down, resumed the meeting, said everything he was supposed to say. But twice during the next 20 minutes, without realizing it, his gaze returned to the corner. The girl did not move, did not reach for her phone, did not fidget. She simply sat there, wrapped in that extraordinary stillness, while the necklace at her throat caught the Seoul afternoon light and burned like a quiet fire. Her name was Zeril Okafor. Before we go any further, drop your city in the comments right now. I genuinely want to know where in the world you are watching this from. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button right now so you never miss a story like this one. Okay, let us continue. She was from Lagos, Nigeria. She had arrived in Seoul 4 days ago and had not spoken more than 40 words to any single person since she landed. She did not know why she had been brought here. She had only been told, by her guardian Tamuno, in a voice that was trying very hard not to be afraid, that she needed to go. That someone would be watching. That she should not tell anyone her full name. She had not been told about the necklace. She had worn it her entire life. It had been placed around her neck when she was 3 days old, and the woman who placed it there, who Tamuno had only ever referred to as the one who loved you first, had made him swear on something heavier than his own life that Zeril would never take it off. Zeril did not know any of this history. She only knew that when she touched the necklace, which she did sometimes without thinking, pressing the small warm pendant between her fingers, she felt something she could not name. Not comfort exactly. Something older than comfort. Something that felt like the echo of a voice she had never heard but somehow already missed. Across the room, one of the junior executives, a man named Choi Byung-woo, who had clawed his way into Skyhan's inner circle through a combination of sharp intelligence and sharper ambition, leaned toward the man beside him and said, quietly but not quietly enough, "Who let her in here? This is a restricted floor." The man beside him said nothing. He had noticed Jiwoon's gaze. Choi Byung-woo had not. "She shouldn't even be here," Choi said, a little louder this time, with a specific kind of confidence that comes from a man who has spent years having rooms rearrange themselves around his preferences. "Someone should call security." The room shifted. Not loudly. Just a slight collective tightening, the way a room tightens when someone has said something that cannot be unsaid. And Han Jiwoon, who was in the middle of a sentence about fourth-quarter projections, stopped speaking. He did not raise his voice. He did not turn his full body toward Choi. He simply turned his head, slowly and with complete deliberateness, and looked at the man. Just looked at him, with those dark, precise eyes. For 3 seconds. Choi Byung-woo felt, in those 3 seconds, like the floor had become slightly less solid beneath him. Jiwoon said nothing. He returned to his projections. He finished his sentence perfectly. But no one in that room said another word about the girl. Across the room, Zeril had heard. Her Korean was something she had never told anyone about, a quiet, private thing she had taught herself over 5 years from recordings and books that Tamuno did not know she had found. She understood every word Choi had said. She understood the shape of the dismissal, the weight of it, the very particular flavor of being made to feel like an error in a room that considered itself perfect. She did not react. She pressed the pendant between her fingers, looked out at the Han River, and breathed. But something in her chest had moved. Slightly. Like a door that had been locked a long time, nudged from the inside by something that was finally, cautiously, beginning to wake up. She had been told not to trust anyone. She had been told to watch and wait. She had not been told what she was waiting for. But sitting in that corner, with the city of Seoul sprawling gold and silver and impossible below her, and the memory of a man's eyes finding her across a crowded room and making the whole room go still, she understood, in the wordless way that certain truths arrive, that whatever she had come here for, it had already begun. That night, alone in the modest hotel room that had been arranged for her, nothing like the luxury floor she had sat on, 3 stars, clean, anonymous, Zeril sat on the edge of the bed and held the necklace up in the lamplight. It was a simple construction. A thin gold chain, older than any jewelry she had ever seen in a shop, the kind of old that meant it had been made by a person's hands, not a machine. At the center, a small pendant. Oval. On one side, smooth gold. On the other, an engraving she had never been able to fully make out. Not Korean, not Yoruba, something in between, or something that belonged to neither, a private language invented by whoever had made it for whoever it was made for. She had shown it to Tamuno once, when she was 11, asking about the markings. He had taken it from her very gently, looked at it for a long time, and then put it back around her neck with hands that were not quite steady. "It belonged to someone who loved you very much," he had said. "Who?" "Someone brave," he had said. And he had changed the subject so skillfully that she had not noticed until later, much later, that he had not answered the question at all. She set the necklace on the bedside table, something she almost never did, and lay back on the thin pillow and stared at the ceiling. In Lagos, the ceiling of her room had a long water stain shaped roughly like the continent of Africa. She had stared at it for 17 years. She had no ceiling story here. Just white plaster and the sound of Seoul traffic 11 floors below. A city that did not know her. A city that should not have felt familiar and yet, in some bone-deep way she could not explain, felt like the edges of a dream she had been having for years without understanding. She closed her eyes. 15 kilometers away, in a penthouse that sat above Seoul like a crown, Han Jiwoon stood at the window and did not sleep. He was holding a photograph. He held it the way a man holds something that has cost him everything, carefully, but with the particular carelessness of someone who has already accepted that it can hurt him and has decided to let it anyway. The photograph was 10 years old. In it, a woman was laughing at something outside the frame, head thrown back, one hand raised to brush hair from her face. She was Korean, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with symmetry and everything to do with the quality of the light she seemed to carry inside her. Around her neck, so small you would miss it if you did not know to look, was a necklace. A thin gold chain. An oval pendant. Han Jiwoon pressed his thumb to the photograph and then set it down on the glass surface of his desk, face up, and walked to the window. Her name had been Min Seo-rin. She had been 23 when the photograph was taken, a year before everything ended. A year before the night she did not come home. A year before the search that found nothing. Before the family closed ranks, said she had chosen to leave, said there was no evidence of anything else, said grief was a private matter and the matter was closed. A year before Jiwoon had learned what it meant to become the kind of cold that does not come from weather. He had not spoken her name aloud in 7 years. He had trained himself out of it the way you train yourself out of a reflex, through repetition and discipline and the very deliberate construction of a life that left no room for the thing you were trying not to feel. And then today, a girl had walked into his executive lounge in a white dress, and around her neck had hung a necklace that had been buried, that should have been buried, with the last thing Seo-rin had ever sent him. The letter had come 3 months after she disappeared. No return address. Postmarked Lagos, Nigeria, a detail that had meant nothing to him at the time and had haunted him every day since. 2 sentences, written in her handwriting, which he had memorized long ago. She is safe. Keep her safe. He had not known what it meant. He had shown it to no one. He had hired investigators who found nothing. He had flown to Lagos himself, once, a private trip no one in his family knew about, and had walked the streets of the city like a man searching for a face in a country of 20 million faces, which was exactly what he was. He had found nothing. He had come home. He had become colder. He had built the company into an empire with the focused energy of someone who has decided that achievement is the only channel left open to him. And now a girl from Lagos was sitting in his building, in his city, wearing Seo-rin's necklace. He turned from the window and picked up his phone. He called one number, the only number that mattered right now, and waited 2 rings. "I need everything," he said, when the line picked up. "Her name. Where she's staying. Who brought her here. Everything. By morning." He ended the call and stood in the dark with Seoul shining beneath him and the photograph of Seo-rin face up on the desk, and for the first time in 7 years, Han Jiwoon felt something other than cold. He felt afraid. In Lagos, the story of Zeril Okafor began the way most stories of quiet children begin, at the edge of someone else's life, in the space that adults forget children occupy. She had grown up in a 2-story house in a neighborhood that was neither rich nor poor, in the kind of middle that requires effort to maintain. Tamuno Okafor was not her father. He had told her this when she was 8, gently, over a dinner of jollof rice and fried plantain, as though the information were a simple fact about the weather rather than the central mystery of her existence. "Then who is my father?" she had asked. "I don't know," he had said, and she had believed him, because Tamuno was the worst liar she had ever met. The man could not deceive a child. "And my mother?" Tamuno had looked at his plate for a long time. "She was someone extraordinary," he had finally said. "Someone who made a very difficult choice because she loved you more than she loved herself." "Where is she now?" "Gone," he had said. And that word, in his mouth, in that particular voice, had carried more weight than any explanation. Gone was not dead, she had sensed even at 8. Gone was something more complicated. Gone was something that had been done to someone rather than something that had happened. She had not asked again. Not because she stopped wondering, but because she was the kind of child who understood, instinctively, that some doors need a different key and that asking the wrong question locks the door tighter. Instead, she watched. She observed. She built up a picture of the world through silence and attention, the way a naturalist builds a picture of an ecosystem, by being still long enough that the truth of the thing stops hiding from you. She noticed, for instance, that twice a year, without explanation, Tamuno received packages with no return address. He opened them in private, but once she had seen the look on his face afterward, something between relief and grief, the expression of a man receiving news that is better than the worst news but nowhere near good. She noticed that certain subjects made Tamuno's hands do a particular thing, a small, involuntary clench, like a man absorbing a small electric shock. Korea was one of those subjects. Not Korean food, which he made sometimes with an ease that suggested deep familiarity. Not Korean culture, which he seemed to understand at a level that went beyond casual interest. Just Korea itself, the nation, the place. As though the country were a name he had once loved and now found difficult to say. She noticed that he kept a photograph in the drawer of his bedside table. She had seen it once, the drawer left open by accident, and had not touched it but had seen it. A photograph of a woman she did not recognize, Korean, laughing at something, very beautiful, with a hand raised to her face. She had not told Tamuno she had seen it. She had filed it, the way she filed everything, in the careful archive of things she was waiting to understand. And then, 6 weeks ago, Tamuno had come home from work with a stillness about him that was different from his usual stillness. Heavier. Like a man who has been carrying something for a long time and has reached the moment where the carrying must end one way or another. He had sat across from her at the kitchen table, folded his hands, and said, "There is something I need to ask you to do. And I need you to trust me even though I cannot explain everything." "Okay," she had said. "Someone has arranged for you to go to Seoul. To Korea. There will be a hotel, a contact, some things you will be shown or that will happen. I don't know exactly what. I was not told everything. But I was told that you will be safe, and I was told that it is time." Time for what? Tamuno had looked at her with eyes that were doing that thing she hated, the thing where they were saying something his mouth was refusing to say. "Time for you to know where you come from," he had finally said. "And who you are." She had sat with that for a long moment. "And the necklace," she had said, touching it. "Does this have something to do with it?" Tamuno had looked at the necklace for a long time. Something moved across his face, the photograph drawer feeling, the twice-a-year package feeling. "Don't take it off," he had said. "Not for anything. And if anyone recognizes it—" He had stopped. "If anyone recognizes it," she had said. "What?" He had stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the street for a moment, and then turned back. "Be careful," he had said. "Be very, very careful." He had hugged her at the airport like a man sending someone into something he could not follow them through. She had felt the tremble in his arms that he was working hard to suppress. She had not cried. She had pressed the pendant between her fingers and walked through the departure's gate and not looked back, because she had learned, somewhere in 17 years of careful observation, that looking back while walking forward is the surest way to fall. The morning after the executive lounge, Zeril woke to a message on the phone that had been left in her hotel room, a simple phone, prepaid, with no name attached. The message was a single line, "Stay visible. He is watching." She did not know who had sent it. She did not know if it was comfort or warning. She reread it twice, then set the phone face down on the bedside table and went to shower. She was in the hotel lobby at 9, as she had been the 2 mornings before, because the message she had received on the first day had told her to be in the lobby each morning at 9. Each previous morning, nothing visible had happened. She had sat in one of the lobby chairs, ordered tea she did not drink, and watched the city move past the glass doors. Each time, she had felt the same thing, the sensation of being observed by someone she could not locate. This morning was different. This morning, a woman walked into the lobby with the purposeful energy of someone who had been sent somewhere and was not happy about it. She was Korean, perhaps 30, sleek and composed in the way of someone whose composure is professional rather than natural. She scanned the lobby with sharp eyes, found Zeril, and walked directly to her table with the unhesitating trajectory of someone following coordinates. She sat down across from Zeril without being invited. "You're Zeril," she said. "Not a question." "Yes," said Zeril. "My name is Lee Hyren. I work directly for Han Jiwoon." A pause. "He'd like to meet with you." Zeril looked at her steadily. "Why?" Hyren blinked, a small crack in the composure, gone in an instant. It was, Zeril suspected, not a question she had been expected to ask. "He didn't explain his reasons to me," Hyren said. "He rarely does. I was asked to extend the invitation. And if I say no?" Another blink. Longer this time. "Then I go back and tell him that, and we find out what happens next." She tilted her head. "Do you want to say no?" Zeril looked down at the untouched tea. Looked at the necklace reflected faintly in the polished surface of the table. Looked back at Hyren. "No," she said. "I don't." The car that came for her was black and unmarked and spoke the language of money fluently. The driver said nothing. Hyren sat beside Zeril in the back seat and looked at her phone with studied neutrality that was not, Zeril noticed, entirely convincing. The woman kept almost looking at the necklace and then stopping herself. Zeril found this deeply interesting. They did not go to Skyhan Tower. They went somewhere Zeril had not expected, a private garden on the grounds of what appeared to be a large residential property at the outskirts of the city, where old trees created a canopy that muffled the sound of Seoul completely. It felt, standing inside it, like being in a room that the city had forgotten existed. Han Jiwoon was standing with his back to them when they arrived, looking at a pond that sat at the center of the garden, still and dark and reflecting the trees. He did not turn around immediately. Hyren stopped a few meters back, and Zeril, following some instinct she could not have articulated, walked forward and stopped a few feet behind him. They stood like that for a moment that stretched. "Do you know what this place is?" he said. He had not turned around. His voice was lower than she had expected, and quieter, and carried some quality that she could not name immediately. She would identify it later as the sound of a person who has spent years keeping their voice carefully empty of feeling and has become, without meaning to, very good at it. "No," she said. "It belonged to my grandmother," he said. "She planted every tree here herself. She said a garden is the only thing you can build that keeps growing after you stop." He paused. "She died 8 years ago. I've kept it exactly as she left it." He turned around then. She had seen him yesterday at a distance, across the executive lounge. Up close was different. He was not as polished as the photographs she had seen of him in hotel lobbies and corporate profiles. Or rather, he was polished, but the polish did not reach his eyes. His eyes, looking at her, were doing something that struck her immediately as intensely private, the expression of a man seeing something he had stopped believing he would ever see, and working very hard not to show how much it was costing him. His gaze went, as she had known it would, directly to the necklace. He looked at it for exactly 3 seconds. Then he looked at her face. "What is your name?" he said. "Zeril Okafor." "Where are you from?" "Lagos." "How long have you had that necklace?" She did not look away from him. "My whole life. Since I was 3 days old." Something happened in his face. The word for it was not visible in any standard dictionary of expressions. It was the face of a man who has just heard confirmation of something he had already known, but had not been ready for the knowing to arrive. "Who gave it to you?" he said. His voice was still controlled, still empty of what his eyes were full of. "I was told," she said carefully, "that it belonged to someone who loved me." The quiet between them expanded. A bird moved somewhere in the old trees. The pond surface shivered once in a slight wind. "I know this necklace," he said. "I know," she said. He looked at her sharply. "You know." "I know that you recognized it. Yesterday, in the lounge. I saw your face." He studied her for a long moment. This was, she realized, a man who was unaccustomed to being read by anyone, and who was not sure how to respond to being read by a 17-year-old girl from Lagos who had walked into his tower and sat in his corner and stared at his river like she owned the reflection. "You saw my face," he repeated. "You stopped walking," she said. "For 4 seconds. The man behind you almost ran into you." A pause. Then, incredibly, the very corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile. The ghost of a memory of a smile. Something that suggested that once, a long time ago, this man had known how to be surprised with something other than suspicion. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to a stone bench beside the pond. "Please." She sat. He remained standing for a moment, as if sitting would require a concession he was not ready to make, and then he sat on the bench opposite her. "I'm going to tell you something," he said. "And I need you to tell me if it means anything to you." "All right." He looked at the pond. 10 years ago, I was in love with someone. Her name was Min Seorin. She was unlike any person I have ever known. She was brilliant, and she was funny, and she was... He stopped. Resumed. She disappeared. One night she was there, and the next morning she was gone, and the family, my family, told me she had chosen to leave. That there was no evidence of anything else. That I should accept it and move on. Zeril said nothing. She was watching his face with the total attention she gave to things that mattered. "I didn't accept it," he said. "I never accepted it. I hired investigators. I searched for her for 3 years before. Another stop. Before I ran out of places to look. And then you found a place." He looked at her. 3 months after she vanished, I received a letter. No return address. Postmarked Lagos, Nigeria. He paused. 2 sentences. "She is safe. Keep her safe." The garden was very quiet. Zeril's hand had moved, without her fully deciding to move it, to the necklace. Her fingers closed around the pendant. "The necklace," she said quietly. "It was hers." "It was mine first," he said. "I gave it to her. It was my grandmother's. She had asked me to give it to the person I chose." He looked at the pendant in Zeril's fingers. "I was told it was buried with her. When they held the memorial." But it wasn't, Zeril said. No, he said. It wasn't. He looked at her face with those exhausted, precise eyes. Zeril, I need to ask you a question, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer. Okay. Who is your mother? The garden waited. Zeril pressed the pendant between her fingers and felt that old echo, that voice she had never heard but always missed, and said the only honest thing she had, which was also the most frightening thing she had ever said aloud. I don't know, she said. But I think she sent me here to find out. What followed in the next 72 hours was the closest thing to controlled silence that Zeril had ever experienced. Jiwoon did not push. She was beginning to understand, a man who had learned the hard way that pushing caused things to shatter, and he was treating her, with the specific care of someone handling something they are terrified of breaking again. He arranged for her to move to a guest apartment on the grounds of the Sky-Han family property, private, clean, guarded without being made to feel like a prison. He sent Hiren to accompany her when she wanted to move through the city, not as a guard, officially, but Zeril was 17 and perceptive and understood the distinction between official and actual. Hiren, for her part, was watching everything. This was her job, watching, noting, synthesizing. She had been with Jiwoon for 4 years, had seen him in negotiations that made grown men cry, had seen him absorb losses that would have leveled other companies without changing his expression. She had never seen him be gentle with anything. She was watching him be gentle with this girl, and she did not know what to do with that information, so she filed it and watched harder. She had also, the second night, spent 3 hours in her apartment looking at photographs of Min Seo-rin. This was not something she was supposed to be doing. It was not related to her official role. But Hiren had not risen to where she was by ignoring the things she was not supposed to notice, and she was, above everything else, a woman who needed the frame around a picture to make sense before she could look at the picture properly. She pulled up photographs of Seo-rin from Sky-Han family archives she was not, technically, authorized to access, and she spread them across her screen, and she looked at them for a long time. And then she pulled up the lobby security footage from the morning Zeril had arrived. She stared at the 2 screens for a long time. Seo-rin had been 24 when she disappeared. In the photographs, she had a particular quality of expression, something quiet and observant and deeply internal, the face of someone who processed the world through a very fine filter and only let out what they chose to let out. Zeril was 17. A different continent. Different features. Different life. But that quality of expression. That stillness. That particular quality of stillness. Hiren sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling and said, to no one, "Oh no." She did not tell Jiwoon what she had noticed. Not yet. Because she was smart enough to understand that if she was right, then the information needed to be handled with a kind of precision that a rushed conversation could not provide. And because she was honest enough to admit to herself that she was also just slightly afraid of what it would mean if she was right. Instead she watched. And waited. And began, very quietly, to do the kind of research that left no visible footprint. On the 4th day, Elder Kwon Dae-jin came to the house. Zeril did not know who he was when she saw him arrive. She was in the garden, reading, and saw the car pull up through the tree line. She saw the way the household staff moved differently when he got out, the specific deference that distinguishes the acknowledged powerful from the merely wealthy. She saw the way Jiwoon, who had been in a meeting, came out to meet him with the body language of someone who has been expecting something unpleasant and has prepared for it, but not, quite, enough. She went inside through a different door. Old habit. When powerful men arrived unexpectedly, Tamuno had taught her without meaning to, you made yourself smaller and more invisible until you understood what kind of powerful they were. She found a position on the interior side of a large window that looked into the room where Jiwoon received the elder, and she stood back from the glass where she could see but not easily be seen, and she watched. Elder Kwon Dae-jin was perhaps 70. He had the particular quality of old Korean authority, impeccable in dress and bearing, completely accustomed to having the room arrange itself around him, capable of a warmth that was entirely performative and a coldness that was entirely real. He sat across from Jiwoon and crossed his hands in his lap and looked at the younger man with the expression of someone who has come to correct a mistake before it becomes a problem. Zeril could not hear them through the glass. But she could read the conversation in the bodies. Jiwoon's that specific tension in the spine of a man who will not be moved, the elder's the studied patience of someone who has bent many spines before. At one point, the elder said something and gestured in a direction that was, roughly, toward the guest apartment. Toward her. Jiwoon's body did a thing she had not seen it do before. It went absolutely still, the way a body goes still when a deep instinct has activated and the mind is catching up. He said something short. 1 or 2 words. His jaw was set. The elder's expression did not change. He said something longer, something that included, she saw from his hands, a gesture of finality, the motion of a man closing a book. Jiwoon stood up. This was, Zeril understood from the elder's face, not expected. The elder looked up at him with something that was almost surprise. Jiwoon said 3 words. She would never know, not then, exactly what they were. But she knew what they meant. She had seen that particular gesture, that set of the shoulders, that quality of voice even at a distance, once before in her life. Tamuno, at the airport, turning back to a customs official who had spoken to her in a way he found unacceptable, straightening to his full height, saying whatever he needed to say with a total economy of words and zero possibility of reversal. It was the body language of a man telling another man that the conversation was over and the decision had been made. The elder left 20 minutes later. She watched him go from the same window. He did not look toward the guest apartment as he walked to the car. But just before he got in, he paused and looked at the garden, specifically at the old trees, the ones Jiwoon's grandmother had planted, and the expression on his face was one she filed immediately in the drawer marked things I do not yet understand but will. It was not anger. It was something older than anger. Something that looked, from the outside of the glass and the distance of her youth and foreignness, remarkably like fear. That evening, Jiwoon knocked on the door of the guest apartment. She opened it, and he stood in the doorway, and she could see from his face that the meeting with the elder had cost him something, though he had not let it cost him what the elder had wanted it to cost. "Someone wanted me to ask you to leave," he said. "I know," she said. "I saw him arrive." He looked at her for a moment. "You watched from the window?" "Yes." "What did you see?" "I saw you tell him no," she said. Something moved in his face. "Yes," he said. "I did." He paused. "I want to explain something. I don't know exactly who you are. I don't know what the connection is between you and the necklace, and who it came from, and what Seo-rin intended." He stopped. Resumed. "But I know that there is a connection. And I know that someone in my family is afraid of that connection. And I have spent 10 years watching the people who were afraid of Seo-rin make decisions on her behalf without her consent, and I am not willing to let that happen again." Zeril looked at him carefully. "What are you willing to do?" she said. He met her eyes. "Whatever is necessary," he said, "for the truth to come out." She pressed the pendant between her fingers. "Then there's something I need to tell you," she said. She told him about Tamuno, about the twice-yearly packages, about the photograph she had seen in the drawer, Korean woman, laughing, hand raised to her face, about the way Tamuno's hands clenched when Korea was mentioned, about the word gone and the particular weight it carried in his voice, about the things he had not said at the airport and the tremble in his arms and the way he had looked at her like he was sending her somewhere he could not follow and was not sure she would come back from. Jiwoon listened to all of it without speaking, sitting across from her in the spare living room of the guest apartment with his hands folded and his face doing the very precise, very controlled work of a man receiving information that is rearranging everything. When she finished, the silence went on for a long moment. "The photograph," he said. "In Tamuno's drawer. The woman." "Yes." "Can you describe her?" She described her. She had a good memory, had trained it deliberately, and she described what she had seen with enough specificity. The quality of the laugh, the position of the hand, the light in the photograph, the angle of the face, that when she finished, Jiwoon was looking at his own hands with the expression of a man who has been living in a house he thought he knew and has just found a room he didn't know was there. "That was Seo-rin," he said quietly. The apartment was very still. "Tamuno knew her," Zeril said. It was not a question. "Tamuno knew her," he said. They sat with this for a moment. Outside, Seoul was doing what Seoul did at this hour, blazing and moving and indifferent to the quiet reckonings of individual lives. "There's something else," Zeril said. He looked up. "When I was told to come here," she said, "the message, the last thing Tamuno said to me, he said it was time for me to know where I came from, and who I am." She paused. Not what? Who? Jiwoon was very still. He didn't say time to find your family, she said. He didn't say time to understand your history. He said who you are. Like, she stopped. Started again. Like I already am someone specific, and I just don't know it yet. He looked at her face for a long moment. The necklace. Her face. The necklace again. Zeril, he said. His voice was doing something she had not heard from it before. It was, if she had to name it, the sound of a man lowering the last wall he has been standing behind. I think we need to do a DNA test. She looked at him steadily. I know, she said. I've been waiting for you to ask. You've been waiting? Since the garden, she said. When you asked who my mother was. He stared at her. I'm not afraid of what it will show, she said quietly. Are you? He looked at the necklace. At the pendant that had once been his grandmother's, that he had given to a woman he loved, that had come back to him around the neck of a girl from Lagos who sat in his rooms and read him like a language he thought no one else spoke. No, he said. And for the first time, she believed him completely. I'm not afraid of the truth. I've been afraid of not finding it. There's a difference. She nodded. Then let's find it, she said. Outside, Seoul burned and blazed. Inside the guest apartment, something that had been sealed for 10 years cracked open an inch and let in the first thin thread of light. Neither of them slept much that night. But for perhaps the first time since each of them had arrived at the specific loneliness of their individual lives, his cold and glittering and sealed at 34, hers quiet and watchful and unmoored at 17, it was the sleeplessness of something beginning rather than something ending. The necklace lay between them on the table, catching the lamplight, warm and old and patient, as if it had always known it would end up here, in this room, in this city, between these two people who had never met and had somehow always been connected. As if it had been carrying this moment around its neck for 10 years, waiting for the right night to finally put it down. The DNA test was arranged quietly, the way all things were arranged in Jiwoon's world when he did not want them to exist on any official record. A private medical consultant, a sealed facility, a Tuesday morning when the Sky-Han family calendar showed Jiwoon in a budget review meeting that his assistant had quietly rescheduled without explanation. Zeril went with Hiren, who drove personally and said almost nothing the entire way, which Zeril had come to understand was Hiren's version of saying a great deal. The facility was clean and clinical and smelled like every medical space in the world, that particular mix of antiseptic and recycled air that made time feel suspended, like the building existed slightly outside the normal flow of things. A technician who had clearly been briefed to ask no questions asked no questions. The process took 20 minutes. They drove back through a Seoul that was doing its usual magnificent indifference to other people's turning points. In the car, at a red light with the city glittering around them, Hiren said, without looking away from the road, whatever the results show, he's not going to let anyone use them against you. Zeril looked at her profile. You think someone will try? Hiren was quiet for a beat. Elder Kwan came back yesterday. Jiwoon didn't tell you. Zeril absorbed this. What did he want? The same thing he always wants when something threatens the family structure, Hiren said. For the inconvenient thing to disappear quietly. The light turned green. She pulled forward. He used a different word. He called it resolution. And Jiwoon said no again. Jiwoon said something considerably less polite than no, Hiren said. And there was in her voice, buried under the professionalism, something that sounded almost like satisfaction. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now, the kind that exists between two people who have just, without ceremony or announcement, decided to be on the same side of something. The results were expected in 72 hours. They came back in 48. Jiwoon was in his office when the notification arrived, a secure message, encrypted, from the private consultant. He looked at it on his screen for a long time without opening it. He had spent the previous 2 days being very productive. He had run 3 meetings, approved 2 acquisitions, sent 14 significant emails. He had done all of this with the focused efficiency of a man who has learned to use work the way other men use alcohol, as a reliable method of being somewhere other than where the fear lives. But now the message was open in front of him and the fear was here regardless. He thought about Seoul. He thought about the letter postmarked Lagos, The two sentences he had memorized 17 years ago. She is safe. Keep her safe. He thought about Tamuno's hands at an airport he had never seen, trembling in a way a man tries to hide. He thought about a girl sitting in his grandmother's garden pressing a pendant between her fingers with the unconscious gesture of someone touching a thing that has always been home. He opened the message. He read it once. Read it again. Set his phone face down on the desk and stood and walked to the window and stood there for a long time looking at Seoul. Then he picked up the phone and called Zeril. She answered on the second ring. "Can you come to the office?" he said. His voice was doing the controlled empty thing, but she had learned, over the past several days, to hear underneath it, the way you learn to hear the current beneath the surface of a river that looks still. "Now," she said. "Please," he said. That word, from him, was not nothing. She came. He met her in a private conference room rather than his main office, a room she had not been in before, smaller, with a single long window and 2 chairs and no boardroom performance to it. When she came in, he was standing near the window, and he turned when she entered, and she saw his face. She stopped walking. She had seen Jiwoon controlled and precise, and occasionally the ghost of warm, and once, in the garden, something close to honest. She had not seen this. This was the face of a man who has reached the other side of something enormous and is standing in the new territory trying to find his footing. "Sit down," he said quietly. She sat. He remained standing for a moment and then, as if the standing had become too costly, sat across from her. "The results came back," he said. "I know," she said. "I could see it when you called." He looked at his hands. "You are—" He stopped. Looked up at her. Started again. "Genetically, you are—" Another stop. He breathed. "Seorin was your mother." The room held this. Zeril was very still. She had known, she had believed, had felt in the bone-deep way of things that have always been true waiting to be confirmed, but knowing and hearing were different countries, and the distance between them, crossed in a single sentence, was something she felt move through her entire body. "She was alive," Zeril said. Her voice was steady. She was working at the steadiness, the way you work at a wall you're trying not to let crack in public. "When she had me, she was alive." "Yes," he said. "She sent me to Lagos. She hid me with Tamuno." "Yes." "And then she stopped." He was looking at her with the face of a man who has more to say and is choosing the order of it with extreme care. The family maintained for 10 years that she left willingly. That there was no evidence of anything else. A pause, precise and heavy. "The DNA results, in the process of running them, my consultant accessed certain archived records as part of establishing the genetic baseline." Another pause. "Records that should not have been sealed. Medical records, from a private clinic in Jeju, from 10 years ago." She looked at him. "She was brought there," he said. His voice had gone very quiet and very flat, the flatness of controlled devastation. "After you were born. She didn't leave willingly. She was taken there and she was told that if she ever contacted me, or tried to find you, or told anyone what had happened." He stopped. "Who?" Zeril said. He looked at his hands again. "The clinic records show the authorization was signed by a member of the Han family council." A beat. "Elder Kwan," she said. He said nothing. Which was everything. The window showed Seoul going about its enormous, indifferent life. Zeril looked at it for a moment. The city that had been her mother's city, the city her mother had been taken from and brought back to against her will, the city that had swallowed the woman who had loved her first and decided to let the swallowing stand as the official story. "Where is she now?" Zeril said. He looked up. "My mother," she said. "If she was taken to a clinic and told to stay silent, where is she now? Is she alive?" The silence that followed was the longest silence she had ever sat in. "I don't know," he said. "The records end at the clinic. After that." He pressed his hand flat on the table. "I have people looking. As of this morning. They have been looking since an hour after I read the results." She looked at him carefully. "You had already started before you called me." "Yes." "Because you wanted to have something to tell me if—" "Because I refused," he said, with a quiet intensity that silenced her gently, "to call you into a room and give you only the worst of it with nothing else. If I could find her—" He stopped. I am trying to find her. Zeril looked at the table, pressed the pendant between her fingers. She sent me here, she said quietly, almost to herself. 10 years later. She arranged it somehow. Tamuno said someone contacted him, told him it was time. Which means, she looked up, which means she is alive enough to make arrangements. Something shifted in Jiwoon's face. She's alive, Zeril said. And she sent me to find you. He was very still. Not just for me to know who I am, she said. She sent me to you. To Skyhan Tower, specifically. She arranged for me to be visible, to be in that lounge, wearing the necklace. She wanted you to see it. She was working through it aloud now, the careful archive of everything she had observed clicking into new formations. She couldn't come herself. She was made to stay silent. But she could send me. I was the message. Jiwoon looked at the necklace, at the pendant. She is safe, he said very quietly, almost to himself. Keep her safe. That wasn't about me, Zeril said. Was it? He looked up. The letter she sent you. She is safe. That was her telling you she survived. Keep her safe. Zeril's voice did something small and involuntary. She steadied it. That was her asking you to protect me. Before she could even get me to Tamuno safely. She wrote that letter while she was still in danger, and she sent it to you because you were the one person she trusted to understand without explanation. Han Jiwoon, who had not cried in 7 years, who had built an empire out of not crying, who had trained grief the way other men trained muscle until it did what he told it to instead of what it wanted, put his hand over his mouth and looked at the table and breathed. She let him breathe. She was 17, and she had had 18 hours more than he'd had to begin adjusting to this particular enormous thing, and she understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can offer another person is the dignity of their own silence. After a moment, he lifted his head. His eyes were dry. But they were different. Something had been let through that had been locked out for a decade, and the face around them was, for the first time since she had met him, not entirely armored. I am going to find her, he said. Simply. Definitively. The way a man states a fact rather than a plan. I know, she said. And I am going to deal with Elder Quan. I know that too. He looked at her. You're not afraid. I'm terrified, she said honestly. But I've been terrified quietly my whole life. I'm used to it. She looked down at the pendant. She taught me that, I think. Without knowing her. Whatever she was, she passed it to me. The being still. The watching. She stopped. The not running. He looked at her for a long time. You look like her, he said. And his voice, saying it, was the voice of a man who has been holding something for 10 years and has finally, in this small room with the sole window and the empty chairs, been able to put it down. Not the features exactly, but the quality. The way you hold the room without holding it. She did that. Zeril felt something press against the inside of her chest that she could not identify with any word she had learned. She pressed the pendant and breathed. Tell me about her, she said. And Han Jiwoon, for the first time in 10 years, did. He talked for an hour. He talked about how they had met, at a conference, of all places, the kind of corporate event that grinds meaning out of everything, and she had been the only person in the room who seemed genuinely unbeard. How she had said something so precisely funny in the middle of a panel that he had laughed before he could stop himself, which was, at 24, already not something he did frequently. How they had talked for 3 hours after the panel, and he had known, with the specific certainty of someone who does not make emotional decisions easily, that this was not something he was going to be able to file and move past. He talked about her mind, the way she read everything, kept notes and margins in a handwriting so small it was almost a code, made connections between things that seemed to have no business being connected until she connected them, and you could not imagine they had ever been separate. He talked about her laugh, which was the laugh he had photographed, head thrown back, entirely unself-conscious, the laugh of someone who had never been taught that joy was something to manage. He talked about the year before she disappeared, how she had seemed, in retrospect, to be moving toward something, some conclusion she was reaching in private that she had not yet found the words to share with him. How there had been, at the end, a quality of resolve about her. Not distance. Not fear. Something more like a person who has made a decision and is at peace with it even though the decision is difficult. He had not understood it then. He was beginning to now. She had known she was in danger. She had known about the family's opposition. He understood that now, saw it clearly in the architecture of events. She had been carrying a secret that Elder Kwan had decided was incompatible with the Han family's interests, and she had known what that meant, and she had made the decision to protect the people she loved by removing herself from the equation rather than letting the equation remove them. She had sent the baby to Lagos. She had sent the necklace with the baby. She had sent Jiwoon 2 sentences that were simultaneously goodbye and promise and instruction. And then she had gone, or been made to go, into whatever silence she had been living in for 10 years. And then, from inside that silence, she had reached out one last time. Had moved one last piece. She had sent her daughter to Seoul. When he stopped talking, the room was a different room than it had been before he started. Zeril was different in it. She was sitting with her hands folded in her lap, and her eyes were wet, 2 thin lines, which she did not acknowledge, and the pendant was in her fingers, and she was looking at the window where Seoul went on outside. "She loved you," Zeril said. "Yes," he said. She stopped. "She arranged this. All of this. For you to find out the truth. For me to know who I am. She did all of that from inside whatever silence they put her in." She looked at him. That's not someone who stopped. He looked at her for a long time. "No," he said, very quietly. "It's not." The door opened without a knock, a thing that did not happen in Han Jiwoon spaces, which was why when it did, both of them turned simultaneously. Hiren stood in the doorway with the expression Zeril had come to recognize as Hiren's version of alarm, composed on the outside, white knuckle on the inside. "We have a problem," Hiren said. "Tell me," Jiwoon said. "The DNA results. There was a breach in the secure channel. Someone intercepted a notification. Not the full results, but enough." She paused. Elder Kwan's office made 3 calls in the last hour. One of them was to a media contact. The room sharpened. "He's going to leak it," Jiwoon said. It was not a question. "He's going to spin it," Hiren said. "The way I'm reading it, he's not going to confirm who she is. He's going to question who she is. Make it a story about a foreign girl and a scandal and an investigation." She looked at Zeril. "He's going to make you the problem before you can make him the answer." Zeril looked at Jiwoon. Jiwoon looked at Hiren. "How long?" he said. "Hours," she said. "Maybe less." There was a pause that lasted approximately 4 seconds, and in it, Zeril watched Han Jiwoon do something she suspected very few people had ever seen. She watched him make a decision not with the calculated, projections and outcomes machinery of the CEO, but with something older and more fundamental. The decision was in his body before it was in his words. She could see it settle into him like a weight he had been waiting to pick up. "Get me the head of communications," he said, standing. "Get me legal. And get me—" He stopped. Looked at Zeril. "Is there anything you need before this becomes public? Anything you need to do, or say, or—" "Call Tamuno," she said immediately. "He needs to hear it from me before he hears it from anywhere else." Jiwoon nodded. "Of course." He paused. "And Zeril. After this, after we do this, there is no going back to quiet. The family will fight it. The media will." "I know," she said. "You're 17. I know that too," she said. "I've been carrying something I didn't have a name for my entire life." She stood up, and in the standing there was something of the garden, something of the executive lounge, something of the girl who had walked into a room of billionaires and sat down like she had always been there. "I'd rather carry it in the open than in the dark." He looked at her for a moment. That ghost of a smile, not a smile, the country a smile comes from, moved through his expression. "She would have said the same thing," he said. She pressed the pendant between her fingers. "I know," she said. And the knowing, this time, was different, warmer and more terrible and more real than any knowing she had carried before, because now it was not just her own knowing. It was inherited. Tamuno answered on the first ring. He always answered on the first ring when it was her. "Zeril," he said. Just a name, and she could hear in it the 7 weeks of carefully managed worry, the airport tremble kept alive and waiting. "I know," she said. "I know who she is." A sound on the line that she could not categorize. Not words. Just something that comes before words, when the thing you have been holding for 17 years finally finds somewhere to land. Is she? He started. We don't know where she is yet, Zeril said. But we know she's been alive. And we know she sent me. She paused. You knew her, Tamuno. You knew her and you kept her secret and you raised me and you never told me. Her voice did not carry accusation. Just the clean weight of a fact. Why? Silence on the line. She heard him breathe. Because she asked me to, he said. She said when the time came, you would find your way to it. That you were like her. That you would know how to be still until the right moment. A pause. She said the necklace would find him before any words could. It did, Zeril said softly. He's a good man, Tamuno said. And in the question was everything. 17 years of raising someone else's daughter and loving her completely and letting her go anyway, all of it compressed into 4 words. She looked at Jiwoon across the room, where he was already moving, already setting the machinery of truth into motion, already doing the thing he had decided to do with the absolute commitment of someone who has been waiting 10 years to do something that matters. Yes, she said. He's a good man. She heard Tamuno breathe again. This time it was different. The exhale of a man putting down something heavy, finally, after a very long walk. What happened next happened fast, the way important things often do when they have been compressed into a small space for a long time and finally find room to expand. Jiwoon moved through his organization with the specific controlled urgency of someone who has decided that the cost of half measures is higher than the cost of full ones. Communications were briefed. Legal was positioned. A statement was prepared, not reactive, not defensive, but declarative, the kind of statement that does not ask for anything because it is not offering anything for debate. Elder Kwan's leak, when it came, was what Hiren had predicted, a carefully shaped ambiguity, the kind of story designed not to reveal but to taint, seeding the public narrative with just enough question mark to make Zeril's existence a matter of controversy rather than truth. The headline, on a media outlet known for its proximity to certain old-money Korean families, read, "Who is the foreign girl at the center of a Sky Han family investigation?" It was online for 47 minutes before Jiwoon's response went out. The response was not a statement, exactly. It was not a press release or a carefully worded non-confirmation. It was a video, short, 2 minutes and 40 seconds, filmed in the private garden among the old trees, Jiwoon standing with the same stillness he always brought to things that mattered, speaking directly into the camera with the precision of a man who has chosen every word and would not change any of them. He confirmed the DNA results. He confirmed Zeril's identity. He named Elder Kwan Dae-jin as the member of the Han Family Council who had authorized the clinic records. He called for a full investigation. And in the final 30 seconds, he looked at the camera and said something that Hiren, watching from beside the camera operator, would remember for the rest of her life, not because it was dramatic, but because it was the opposite of dramatic. It was the quietest thing she had ever heard him say. There is a woman who has been silent for 10 years because powerful people decided that her silence protected their interests. I am asking publicly, now, for anyone who knows her current location to come forward. Her name is Min Seorin. She is alive. And she deserves to come home. The video went live at 4:17 in the afternoon. By 6 p.m. it had 3 million views. By 10 p.m., Elder Kwan Dae-jin had retained legal representation and issued a statement denying the allegations and describing the situation as a private family matter being exploited for public sympathy. By midnight, 2 members of the Han Family Council had quietly and separately contacted Jiwoon's legal team. And at 11:43 p.m., a message arrived on a phone number that no one except 3 people in the world knew, Jiwoon's private line, the one that existed off every official record. The message was a single photograph. A woman, older than the photographs Jiwoon had studied for years, different in the ways that 10 years of a hard and hidden life make a person different, but unmistakably, in the tilt of the chin and the quality of the eyes and the particular way the light seemed to exist around her rather than simply fall on her, herself. She was standing outside. Trees behind her. She was looking at the camera with an expression that could not be translated into any single word, but that contained, in its complex architecture, something that had been waiting a very long time to exist. Below the photograph, 5 words. I watched the whole video. Jiwoon sat in the dark of his office and read those words 5 times and then put the phone down and pressed both hands flat on the desk and breathed with the deliberate care of a man making sure he stayed inside his own body. She was alive. She had seen it. She knew he was looking. He picked the phone back up. Typed 1 line. Sent it. Where are you? He waited. No response came that night. But he kept the phone in his hand. In the guest apartment, Seoul sat on the bed with a necklace in her palm rather than around her neck, the first time she had held it rather than worn it, the first time she had looked at it as an object with a history rather than just a part of herself. The engraving on the back caught the lamplight the same way it always had, warm and patient. She turned it over. And over again. Thinking about a woman who had put this around the neck of a 3-day-old baby and asked a man to swear on something heavier than his life that the baby would never take it off. Thinking about what that meant. Not the pragmatics of it, the sending a signal, the making herself findable, but the other thing. The more primary thing. The fact that a woman in crisis, in danger, in the process of losing or being separated from everything she loved, had thought, the necklace. She will have the necklace. So she will always have something of me around her throat. Something warm. Something that catches the light. Even the hiding had been an act of love. Even the silence had been an act of love. Seoul pressed the pendant between her fingers one last time and then, carefully, put the necklace back on. It settled at her throat the way it always had, like it belonged there, like it had always known. She lay back and looked at the white plaster ceiling of the Seoul guest apartment and thought, I came here not knowing who I was. I came here with an address I was given and a phone I didn't understand and a necklace I had worn my whole life without knowing its name. I know my name now. And somewhere in this world, in whatever hidden place she has been kept for 10 years, her mother was alive. And Jiwoon was looking. And the necklace was warm at her throat, patient as it had always been, carrying its small golden warmth through whatever came next. She did not sleep for a long time. But when she did, it was deep and dreamless, the sleep of someone who has, for the first time, somewhere to put down what they've been carrying. In the morning, Seoul was golden and clear and enormous, and the Han River shone below the tower where everything had begun, and the city went about its magnificent life without knowing or caring that somewhere in its vast and indifferent beauty, a 17-year-old girl from Lagos had become the axis around which a 10-year secret was beginning, finally and irrevocably, to turn. There were still things unresolved. Elder Kwan had not been brought to account. The investigation was in its first hours. The question of what had happened to Seo-rin in the years of silence, where she had been, how she had survived, who had helped her, remained unanswered. The question of whether the 5 words on Jiwoon's phone would become a meeting, or a reunion, or something more complicated and less clean than either, remained suspended in the particular uncertainty of things that are true but not yet fully arrived. And there was another thing, something Seoul had noticed but not yet said, had filed in the careful archive the way she filed everything she was not yet ready to know. On the night Hiren had driven her back from the DNA clinic, when they had stopped at the red light and Hiren had told her about Elder Kwan's return, Hiren had said something, a single sentence, in a voice that was trying very hard to be professionally neutral. She had said, the records from the clinic, there were 2 files. And then the light had turned green, and Hiren had driven forward, and the sentence had simply hung in the car, and Seoul had not asked about it, and Hiren had not finished it, and they had ridden in silence the rest of the way. 2 files. Seoul had turned it over in the night, in the quiet hours of Seoul, and she had not yet said it to anyone, and she was not yet sure what it meant. But she was 17, and she had been observing things carefully her whole life, and she knew, with the instinct of someone who has learned to read the spaces between what people say, that a sentence left deliberately unfinished is not a sentence forgotten. It is a sentence waiting for the right moment to be completed. She would ask. When the moment arrived, she would ask. But that was tomorrow. Or the day after. Or some day in the new territory of her life that she was only now beginning to map. For now, the necklace was warm at her throat. Her mother was alive somewhere in the world. And Jiwoon was holding a phone in a dark office, waiting for a response that had not yet come, with the patient ferocity of a man who has waited 10 years and has learned that waiting and giving up are not the same thing. The story was not over. It was, in the truest sense, only now beginning. And if you stayed this long, if you were here, at the end of this, with the Han River golden in your mind and Seoul's necklace warm in your imagination and the weight of 10 years of silence finally cracking open, then you already know what this story is really about. It is not about secrets or scandals or powerful families protecting themselves with other people's pain. It is about what survives. What refuses to be buried. What a mother carries even when she cannot be there. What a child finds even when she doesn't know she's looking. What love manages to do, even across oceans, even across decades, even across every silence that was designed to make it impossible. It is about the fact that a necklace placed around a 3-day-old throat found its way home. If this story moved you, if any part of it sat in your chest the way certain stories do, that particular weight that is not quite sadness and not quite joy but something in the exact space between them, then you know what to do. Stay close. Leave a comment telling me what moment got you. Tell me your city, tell me your country, tell me where in this wide and extraordinary world you are watching from, because I want to know. I read every single one and they matter to me more than I can say. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And until then, stay rooted. Stay curious. Stay exactly as human as you are. This story was never finished. It just paused.